Hey friends, okay, so today's video I am going to be talking about confession. I did a video about the first Saturdays a couple of weeks ago, and a lot of people said that they would love for me to talk about confession. And so I am going to get into how to go to confession, why to go to confession, and then also I have this little booklet that's going to kind of help with, yes, there's the 10 Commandments that God gave to Moses, but we need to go deeper. Like, what do those 10 Commandments mean? And so I'm gonna kind of dive deep into what it is that we might be doing that is offending and hurting God, because that's the whole point of confession, is to kind of revive our relationship with God. And when we go to confession to a priest, that's what happens. We are reuniting ourselves. We're making ourselves pure and holy again for God, asking Him for forgiveness, humbling ourselves. So, you know, a lot of people are really nervous about confession, going to confession. And I encourage you to just pray if that is what's keeping you, from going to confession. It can be scary to say your sins, especially your big ones. Like, can be super scary sometimes, but it is so good for our soul to humble ourselves and to say that we are sorry to God. And it is through a priest that we get absolution, and that we will be made clean and pure again. And so I just encourage you to be brave and courageous and go to confession. I want to say that I've been to several talks about confession, and the priests always say that there is nothing that they have not heard. And if you're worried about, the priest might recognize you at Mass or whatever, you can always go behind the curtain. There is nothing wrong with that. Some people like the face-to-face. Other people like going behind the curtain, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So I just encourage you to do whatever makes you the most comfortable, even though it might feel uncomfortable. But the reason the priest is there is to help us to get closer to God. The reason why the Catholic faith has the sacraments, baptism will clean us of all of our original sin as a baby, and then we have the Holy Eucharist, that will bring, we get to have Jesus live within us. But confession is where we will be purified. Our soul, it gets dirty. We are humans, we sin, we do things that offend God, even when we try not to. There's mortal and venial sins. So there's two different kinds of sins, venial and mortal sins. So venial sins are like the littler sins that, they still offend God, but when we go to Mass, they are made pure. Like, we ask God for forgiveness for those. There's also mortal sins, and mortal sins are the sins that we might have on our soul, that we never ever want to receive the Holy Eucharist when we have a mortal sin, because that is very offensive to God. We want to be pure when we receive Jesus as much as we can be. So I'm gonna share with you what makes a mortal sin first. So the three things that are necessary for a sin to be mortal is, the first thing, it has to be a serious matter. So it has to be like a grave sin. So using contraceptives, abortion, things like that, those are mortal sins. Having sex outside of marriage, those are mortal sins. Those are big sins. So we never want to do those things. Okay, the second part is to acknowledge or firm belief that the action is serious and wrong prior to committing the act. So if you were never taught that artificial birth control is a mortal sin, then that's something that you can't, you know what I mean? Like, that is different, because you didn't know that that's what the church teaches. Now you do know. So you do need to confess that. But that's what I'm talking about. If you didn't know that it's a mortal sin, then that's something too, that you have to know that it's a mortal sin. And the third thing is, it has to be in full consent of the will. So it can't be something that is forced upon you. It's something that you have actively decided, you knew it was wrong and you decided to do it anyway. Then that is a mortal sin. Okay, so those three things are things that you have to confess. I mean, I encourage you to confess them as soon as possible, because that means that if you die with those sins on your soul, that you will not get to heaven. And that is our main goal, is to get to heaven. This time on earth is so short compared to eternity, that we want to do any and everything we can to have a clean and pure soul for God, so that we may be united with him forever in heaven. Okay, so those are like the mortal sins. Okay, so I'm gonna get into it really briefly, what to do when you get into the confessional, because you might not have gone since your first communion years ago, might have been 50 years ago, who knows how long. So it's really simple. Actually, you know, wait your turn in line. I love when there's a long line in the confessional. That usually means that that church is on fire for God, because they know they're sinners, they know they need to go to confession, and I love it. I love seeing a long line at the confessional at Mass, because all these people want to be pure and holy. I absolutely love it. Anyway, so you'll want to wait in line for the confessional, and then you'll just go in, and the priest will make the sign of the cross, and you will say, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." So you're the first one who talks. You say, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. My last confession was 30 years ago. My last confession was 2 weeks ago." Whatever it is, be as honest as you can about when your last confession is, because that will help them to know, you know, maybe how to counsel you, because they do counsel you. That's a big part of why confession is so important. Okay, so the next thing you'll do is you'll confess all of your mortal sins, all of those big sins that you should not have done. You'll confess those. And then your venial sins, you'll confess all of your sins, but make sure that you confess your mortal sins, the ones that you know that were wrong and you did them anyway. And then at the end you say, "And for all of the sins of my life, I am so sorry." So pretty much every sin that you cannot think of, that, you know, your mind can't go there, like you forgot about them, you want to say, "Please forgive me," and be honest about that. You want to be honest about all of the sins that you can remember, because that is how you will become pure, you know. So anyway, say, "And for all of the sins that I cannot remember at this time." It doesn't have to be this verbiage or words, but just, you know, just do the best that you can, and just let the priest know that it's been a long time, and they'll be very understanding, trust me. And then the priest might ask you some questions to clarify some things, and that's just to help counsel you, because part of their job as priests is to counsel us and help us, because they want to redirect us into ways that will help us with our sin, you know, help us to not sin again, and that type of thing. So they might counsel us at this time, and then your priest will give you a penance. And so what the penance is it is pretty much, it's different every time I go in. Every priest has different penance. Usually, you know, it's 3 Hail Marys, or, you know, I have had where a priest told me to pray a rosary once. So it can be like, you know, a lot, but it's usually like, you know, 3 Hail Marys, and Our Father, whatever. And so as soon as you leave the confessional, usually you go and kneel in the church and you do those. That is part of the confession. So that is the ending of your confession. And then you'll do an act of contrition. And a lot of people get really nervous because they're like, "I don't know the act of contrition by heart." You can totally print it off and bring it in with you. I've memorized it so that I can, whenever I want to, I can go to confession. They usually, in most confessionals now, have it up on in the confessional, so you can just read it right off. So it doesn't have to be anything scary or crazy, but that's pretty much how you do it. You know, I will try to link down below like how to do it step by step, so that, you know, if you want to print it out, you can go for it. So those are like the basics of, you know, the confessional. I'm gonna get into the 10 commandments as well. This might be a long video, and some of the things in here you might not have even known is not okay in the Catholic Church. And the reason the Catholic Church has these things is because they have discerned, they have prayed what is offensive to God, because their job, the church, is to unite us with God so that we can be as pleasing to God, and because ultimately they want us to get to heaven. Okay, so there might be things in here where you're like, I didn't know that was a sin, you know. And the reason I say that is because there are things all the time on TV and just the media in the world that this is like everyday things, like, you know, having sex outside of marriage, like that's like on every TV show. That is a mortal sin. So the world does not care about your soul. They care about your pleasure and making you happy, you. They're not focused on God. So keep that in mind when you listen to these. I will see if I can link this below. I don't think it's on Amazon. I think it's at a Catholic bookstore called Leaflet Missal. So I will try to link it below if you want something like this. So pretty much I'm going to go through the 10 Commandments, and it's going to be really in depth. So please stick with me. Okay, so the first one is, I am the Lord your God. You shall not have strange gods before me. So if you are ever involved in practices of witchcraft, the Ouija board, seances, palm readings, tarot cards, hypnosis, astrology, black magic, those are all sinful things, and you're putting those things above God. So those are actually pretty big sins. So another one is also being involved with new agey things, you know, like crystals, like, you know, oh, let me put crystals all around me. Jesus is the only thing that can help us in anything. The rest is not good. So if you were atheistic or anything like that, anything that is not good, if you have left the church for a long period of time, then you need to go to confession for that. Okay, if you put your faith in superstitions like the horoscopes or good luck charms, so those are sinful things. That's what I'm talking about. I know so many people who are really into horoscopes, and they're like, oh, what's your sign? You know, I'm Cancer, what are you? Whatever, like, stay clear of those. Those are superstitions. So joining the Masons or secret societies, those are not good. Do not have anything to do with the Masons or anything like that. Okay, receiving Holy Communion in the state of a mortal sin. Also, receiving the sacraments of confirmation or marriage while in the state of mortal sin. That's a sin. Like, even though like marriage is a great thing and our wedding day is great, we should always go to confession before going. Me and my husband did it the morning before. It was awesome. Okay, willfully participating in general absolution at services. So some services have general absolution. That is just for emergencies. Like, churches should not have those unless like there's a comet falling to the sky and they know we have, you know, 12 hours to live. Maybe that's one thing, or a ship is about to fall, but we should never do absolution. We need to do face-to-face with a priest. So involvement in false or pagan religions, not okay. Willfully denying the faith of the Catholic Church. So not standing up for the faith. Pretty much despair of God's grace and mercy. So not truly believing that God can forgive you is not good. We have to believe in God's mercy, and Satan wants us to not believe. I've had lots of videos about this, but he wants us to believe that we are not worth God's mercy, and that's not true. Presumption. So committing a mortal sin and saying, you know what, I'll just go to confession later. It's not, you know, that's what confession's all about. No, that is a sin. We need to not do the mortal sin. We need to ask God in that moment of the mortal sin for the grace to help us to get out of that temptation. Hatred towards God. Failure to receive Holy Communion at least once a year. So the Catholic Church says that you have to receive at least once a year to be Catholic. And usually preferably during the Easter season. And then the last one is the Desperation of the Holy Eucharist. So, so that is just the first commandment. So that's a lot to chew on. I know that, but this goes in depth, and we want to go in depth because that is how we will be pure. That is how I always want to know my sins. I do. I ask God all the time, what are my sins today? Please reveal them so that I cannot do them, so I won't do them again, because I want to truly be pure for God. Okay, the second one is, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And this is, I see it all the time in our world. I see it all the time in TV shows and movies, even movies I love. I'm like, why did you say that? Like Padre Pio, this kind of funny story. When he was a little boy, if somebody said the Lord's name in vain, he would literally run away. Like, that's what we want to do. You know, I've heard of people who, you know, are near somebody and they said, you should never say that. You know, like, it is a big deal. It's a second commandment. And I see it all, I hear it all the time on, you know, on TV and people. Anyway, we need to learn not to say that. So pretty much using God's name as a curse. Another one is seriously wishing evil upon another person. So if you have hatred, or if you are so mad at somebody, to wish them ill is a bad sin. That is not ever okay. We should only hope and pray for the best of people, even our enemies. God said that in the Bible. We need to love our enemies and pray for them. Okay, so serious slander or insult of a sacred person or object. So we never want to slander anybody of a sacred person, really anybody. Making an oath in a secret society like the Masons or something like that, not okay. Okay, telling a lie or withholding a serious sin in confession. So if you go to confession, you're saying everything, but you're like, oh, I can't, like, that sin is so big, I don't want to, you know, say anything, I'm so embarrassed. Like that's a sin of itself, to hold back that sin. Okay, so the next one is blasphemy. So words of hatred, reproach, speaking ill of God, those are not okay. Lying under oath, swearing false oaths. So that's the second commandment. So, okay, the third one is remember to keep holy the Sabbath day. Missing Mass on Sunday or a holy day of obligation, which that's something that, like, it took me a while. Like, I have to write it in a calendar big time and circle it, because, like, sometimes they just, like, pop up out of nowhere to me. And so, but that's a mortal sin. If you miss going to Mass on Sunday, if there's not a good reason, a serious reason, or a holy day of obligation, like, those are mortal sins, actually. So those are, you need to go to confession. Doing unnecessary work on Sunday for a long period of time, more than several hours. So I actually took this to heart when I was a little girl. So I knew it was not okay to work on Sundays. So I worked at, like, a thrift store. I've worked several different places, but one thing that I always said I would not do is work on Sundays. And I let the people know, unless it was a nursing home. I used to be a nurse's aide at Little Sisters of the Poor, and so that's different because those are necessary things, you know, like they need, like, the old people in the nursing home needed help, you know, in whatever they're doing. So that was necessary. Whereas if you're working at, you know, Target or whatever, like, those are not necessary things, you know. So so working on Sunday is a sin if it's not necessary. Failure to fast or abstain on appointed days. So the appointed days in the Catholic Church to fast and abstain are Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. Those 2 days. And I have a whole nother video, but you just want to, they're uncomfortable days, but they're so good for the soul. Fasting is always a great thing. Requiring employees to work on Sunday if it's a non-essential occupation. So if you are the owner of, you know, a store and it's not essential and you're making the people work for you, then that is a sin. You know, that's why I love Chick-fil-A. They are closed on Sundays. I love that they take the Lord's Day seriously. The fourth one is honor your mother and father. Okay, so serious failure to take care of your aging parents. So if you're just putting them in a nursing home and you don't ever go see them, you don't, you know, you're like, okay, that's taken care of. We should always be loving our elderly. Always, always, always. Especially our parents. Serious neglect of the duties of one's state in life. Serious disrespect or disobedience to our parents, our superiors or authorities. Okay, so our superiors as well. Like this kind of falls under honor thy mother and thy father. Wishing death or evil on our parents. I can't even fathom that happening. But abuse or serious neglect of our children. So if we are the parents, we need to take care of our children. We can't just set them in front of the TV all day and hope that they turn out for the best. Like, we need to interact, love them, teach them the faith, read them books, like be good parents, you know, teach them virtue and goodness. Failure to baptize your children in a reasonable time within a few months after the birth. So you need to baptize your children and be honorable to that, like, you know, raise them Catholic. Serious neglect of religious education for the upbringing of your children. It is our response. Even if your kids go to a Catholic school, even if they go to CCD, we still within the home have to teach the Catholic faith. That is something that's very, very important. Okay, failure to carry out the last will of deceased parents. So if your parents, you know, I don't know, if it's in their will, what they want or whatever, you need to do that. Like, that is honoring them. So that is honor thy father and the mother. So it all goes kind of in depth. Like, it's not just, oh yeah, I'm nice to my parents, move on to the next one. Like, we really need to like look deep into it. Okay, so the fifth one is thou shalt not kill. So no murder, homicide, manslaughter. I think everybody knows that one, the thou shalt not kill. The next one is you should never have an abortion. That is a live baby, well baby, never ever okay to have an abortion. That is killing an innocent child. That is very clear in the Catholic Church. Promoting counseling or paying for an abortion is also a mortal sin. Knowingly voting for someone who is for abortion, that will give our tax money to abortions, that is a wrong. We cannot do that. Willfully injuring or trying to hurt another person. Willfully leading another into a serious sin. So if we know that something's going to lead somebody into a serious sin, that's not okay. That is a sin of itself. Driving dangerously or recklessly. Driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Willfully harboring hatred for another person. Taking or selling illegal drugs. Willfully drunkenness. So being drunk is a sin because you don't have control of yourself. Sterilization. So if you got your tubes tied or a vasectomy, those are considered mortal sins. The promotion of or involvement of euthanasia. Serious entertainment of suicidal thoughts. Like, that is something you should definitely go get counseling for, get help for. Willfully failing to bury the body or ashes of the dead. Like, that's something we need to do. Willfully engaging in unjust lawsuits. Bigotry, hatred of persons of other races. That is a sin. Okay, and the last one is intentionally placing temptation before the weak. Okay, so I mean, there's a lot there to chew on, like, holy cow. And some things you might not have even known, like, those are sins within the Catholic Church, like, and that's why it's really good to know, like, what are the sins so that I do not do them, you know, type of thing. Okay, the sixth one is you shall not commit adultery. Fornication, intercourse prior to marriage is not okay. That is in the Bible. Masturbation or other impure acts with the self, those are considered sins. We need to confess those. Homosexual acts, using of contraceptives, these are sins in the Catholic Church. Like these have been, and I just encourage you, if you have any of these like sexual sins, to read Theology of the Body by Pope John Paul II. He does an excellent job explaining why that these things are not okay. And our goal is to be pure and holy and live the full life that God has planned for us. So, okay, so the next one is dressing or acting in a manner intending to arouse another person except for a spouse. Kissing or touching another passionately for the purpose of arousal except for spouse. Allowing another to kiss or touch you in a sexual manner except for spouse. Intentionally causing a sexual climax outside of intercourse. Intentionally withdrawing before ejaculation. Immodest dressing. Sexual acts with animals. Oral sex is permitted as foreplay in marriage, but outside of that, it's not okay. Prostitution, rape, in vitro fertilization is considered a grave sin in the Catholic Church. Surrogate motherhood, so somebody else carrying your child, considered a sin. Selective reduction of babies in the womb. Okay, types of fertility tests that involve immoral acts. Involvement in or support of human cloning. Willfully divorcing your spouse, unless, you know, it's annulment, and that's when the church will say like, okay, there was an actual reason that this divorce is okay. Like, and it pretty much means that you were never married before. But to willfully just divorce somebody just because you're like, oh, I don't love him anymore, I want to, you know, move on with my life, that's not okay in the Catholic Church. I have a whole video on that if you want. Incest, polygamy, many wives or husbands, cohabitation prior to marriage, before you're married, living together, destroying the innocents by seducing or introducing them to immorality, lust in the heart. If I only could, you know, like those are not good either. Like we need to run away from things like that that are not good. You know, if we're thinking of, you know, somebody else's, you know, spouse, or, you know, fantasizing about, you know, movie star or something like that, not good. Those are not ever okay, even if you're not acting upon them. You need to run away from those. Swinging or wife swaps. Okay, so there's a lot in there. I feel like that's a big one in our culture. Is a lot of those are, yep, very plain and open and out there. Like I said, I encourage you, if you have any questions about all of those, read Theology of the Body, because Pope John Paul II is not shy about talking about all of these issues. Like, he does a great job. And Christopher West, so Theology of the Body is a little intense. So Christopher West does a great job at making it layman terms, so even I can understand it. So Christopher West, I'll link their books down below. I'll see if I can link this too, if you're looking for that, or another, you know, there's different examinations of conscience. So anyway, the fifth one is you shall not steal. Okay, stealing a large amount of money or valuable items, willfully destroying or defacing another's property. Stealing something consecrated to God or from a holy place. Buying, selling, receiving, or concealing items known to be stolen. So if you know somebody stole something and they want to sell it to you for a much cheaper price, that's not okay. That's a sin. Willfully failing to make restitution. Excessive gambling. Defrauding workers of their wages, serious failure to fulfill work requirements, taking advantage of the poor, simple, or less fortunate, taking bribes, blackmailing, fraud, or embezzlement, price fixing, tax evasion, excessive waste or expenses, violations of copyrights, slavery, serious cruelty to animals, pirating. Those are all forms of stealing, different ways. So it's not just necessarily going and taking, you know, your neighbor's, you know, bike. Like it goes deeper than that. We need to think like, is this legit? Is this okay? Okay, so the 8th one is you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. So false witness, not under oath, or perjury under oath. Telling large or premeditated lies, not okay. Serious gossip. So if you're gossiping, that is a sin. You should not be gossiping unless you're talking about somebody in the nicest way possible. And that's something that, you know, I think as women, sometimes we can struggle with. And the best way to get over that is just when you're about to say something not nice about somebody, try to think of the good in them and say the good instead. Okay, so the 9th one is you shall not desire your neighbor's wife. So viewing pornography in books, magazines, movies, the internet, not okay. Run away from that. You know, those, don't do it. Reading sexually explicit materials. So what is it, 50 Shades of Grey? There's a lot out there that you might not even think, and then you're reading and you're like, oh my goodness, throw those books away. Don't deal with them. Dwell on impure thoughts or fantasies for the purpose of arousal. Willfully lusting after another. Okay, so the 10th one is you shall not desire your neighbor's goods. Serious or willful greed or intention to steal or destroy the goods of another. So, and just like, don't be jealous. Don't, you know, have envy towards people. Don't, you know, if somebody has something nice, be happy for them and move on. You know, it's not something good to dwell on because that can be damaging to our soul. So those are the 10 commandments. Those are a little more depth than I know when I first read this, I was like, okay, very eye-opening, very in-depth, as you can tell. I like that though, because that means that I can know what the sins are, you know, because I don't want to do anything that would hurt God or offend him in any way. And so if we know what those things are, then we can stay away from them. Satan doesn't want us to know these sins. He doesn't want us to know what offends God, because then we get to live a pure and holy, joy-filled life. Just like encourage you before you go to confession, like to really, really dive deep into your soul. What are things that I've done, and start fresh. That's the great thing about going to confession, is it's a do-over. It is a, I am so sorry, and you're wiped clean. I will say though, that confession, so we need to still do like reparation for our sins. Like that's a thing. So for example, if my son were to break my neighbor's window, and like, you know, was playing baseball and like the baseball went through the window, then my son would have to go over and say, I am so sorry, I just broke your window, like I am so sorry about that, you know. And then neighbor might say, that's okay, I forgive you. My son still needs to pay for that window. He needs to make it right. That's partly why we have penance, but it's gonna take a while sometimes to heal completely. Even though our soul at that point is just, it's clean and it's pure and it's good, we still, you know, we still have to like give it to God and like repay for the window and, you know, that type of thing. So anyway, I just encourage you to go to confession. It is so beautiful for your soul. It is just amazing. And so I just encourage you to take courage to go, because you will feel like $1 million after. I guarantee you will sleep so much better at night. You will lead such a more joyful life. I read this recently. Confessing one's sin is often what revives the person's relationship with God. Totally agree with that. We need to revive our relationship with God. Say that we are sorry, humble ourselves, be pure of heart, and live our life after that to the fullest that we can in purity for God, because that is truly how we will live a free life, is going to confession, you know, all these sacraments and stuff. So anyway, this is a very long video. If you're still watching, thank you. And until next time, I will see you all later. God bless. Bye.